You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And not only are we your hosts for the show, but we've been MIA for a little bit. You know, I was all set to say, yeah, man, we're gonna talk about the season finale of The Bad Batch because it came out last week. Mm-hmm. But then I realized that when I looked at what we reviewed, I'm like, oh. I mean, it's unfortunately because of our schedules, we haven't been able to be on for a while. But that was pretty funny, actually. I was like, oh wait, we haven't done episode 7 yet. So 8 and 9 were released as a finale. Episode 10. So this is kind of their mid-season finale that just came out, which we will be reviewing next week, by the way, which will actually fall in, well, yeah, I guess it depends on how you look at things, because actually episode 10 is coming out next week, so we're going to have to see how we'll handle this. I mean, we'll either do maybe a pre-recorded show and get that out so we can catch back up, or maybe we'll just keep rolling the way we're rolling. We'll see, or maybe we'll take a couple of episodes at a time. Maybe we'll do, 8 and 9 next week, and then 9 and then do 10 and 11 or something like that. Either way, we're here to talk about Bad Batch episode 7. This is called The Clone Conspiracy, and this is what this show should be about. This, I think, really represented some of the best stuff. I mean, right from the opening scene, you saw that beautiful shot of Coruscant. And this is actually a really Coruscant-heavy episode, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, Coruscant is the focal point of the Galactic Empire. It was once the Republic, now it's the Galactic Empire. And yeah, I mean, it opens up once again with that beautiful scene or this beautiful shot of the heart or the downtown area, I guess, of Coruscant.
Yeah.
And the thing that's just so ominous, the Jedi Temple's missing.
Yeah, I know. I saw that too. I noticed that too, that the Jedi Temple was definitely missing, that he wasted no time in tearing that down. But I mean, everything. So the things that I thought were cool were this episode was really ominous. Like there was a sense of dread. It was a sinister thing. Obviously, Admiral Rampart has taken front and center. Now, correct me if I don't know if you know the answer to this or not. Senator Chuchi? Something Chi. Wasn't she in the Clone Wars?
I believe so.
I think she was. I could be wrong. Because
I think she was one of Amidala's friends.
That's the thing. I think she was either one of Amidala's friends, or she might have been, it just feels, I don't know. It feels like I've seen her before. That's why I asked, because her name and just, everything else, I don't know. It just seemed to me like it was familiar. I admit that I could be off, but it did feel like she had been in the Clone Wars. She was familiar. Of course, Bail Organa was in there. Mm-hmm. And I really like the fact that they got a guy who sounds somewhat like Jimmy Smits. Yeah. There's nothing bothers me more than when, they'll have somebody come in and replace an actor, because I mean, let's face it, a lot of these guys do not have time to come in and voice their characters. And it's funny because that actually bites them, right? In the case of Hayden Christensen, he actually was offered the Clone Wars series, and then he wanted too much money, so they're just like, all right, and they ended up paying, what's his name? Matt Reeves or something like that.
Lofton or something like that.
I don't know. I mean, one of these days we'll actually research our episodes before we actually talk about them. It's a goal, people. It's not too late for it to be a New Year's resolution, I guess. Uh, but yeah, Matt. I know his first name.
Yeah, his first name is Matt.
So it was funny because, he does a really good job. And actually, he's played a lot of different characters, but Anakin was one of the main ones, and he just knocks it out of the park, and you don't really miss it. And of course, if we're talking about the Clone Wars, we got to give credit to the guy that voices all the clones. I mean, to actually give each one of these guys personalities, even though they continually introduce new clones, is just an incredible thing. And I really do think that that's worth mentioning, because sometimes
Matt Lantner. That's his name.
Yes.
That was close.
You were close. I know there is a Matt Reeves though. Of course, it's not the guy we're talking about, so I guess it doesn't matter. But, but I mean, it's just really. I don't think a lot of people really give enough credit to these voice actors when it comes to their contribution, to the Clone Wars or the Bad Batch or any of the other animated series. I mean, they really do sell it every bit as much as the music and the visuals, because we're always talking about the visuals. And I have to say, this season, and we've brought this up in previous episodes, this season they have really, really upped the quality of the animation, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the Bad Batch it's become one of those shows that, much like the Clone Wars, where it fills in a lot of the gaps, that we need in Star Wars to be filled, and when it answers some of our bigger questions about the whole stormtrooper thing. And I think that's kind of where this is on the path, because that's where this is kind of centered around. This whole story arc right now seems to be focusing on, decommissioning clone troopers and trying to bring in this whole new military, which is pretty much comprised of the people from these respective planets to actually defend the galactic empire. So with that, the animation, of course, like you mentioned, has stepped up. We've seen a lot of different changes, a lot of beautiful shots, a lot of I don't know if I can call it cinematography in animation, but
I think
just
so.
a lot of the movements though within this this animated series is quite good.
Well, it's like you bring up, and you bring this up. I mean, I don't know if it's been brought up recently, but I remember when we were talking about some of the earlier animations. One of the things that you always bring up is the fact that you eventually forget that you're watching an animated show. It really feels like you're watching a live action film or something. And it's because, like you said, the cinematography is just so good. The writing is so good that if you're just getting lost in the story, which is very easy to do, like I said, the music, the voice acting, it all comes together to make this really good product that definitely makes you forget that you're watching an animated show. That's one of the reasons why I think people get so tweaked out every time I say, the Clone Wars cartoon or, bad. It's like, let's just not call it a cartoon. This is a little bit beyond, and I can't argue with them. I mean, they're absolutely right. This is really not a cartoon. This is an animated series.
Sure.
It sounds
this is
PC,
on the lines
but...
of Well, it's definitely along the lines of the 92 Batman the animated series,
Yes.
Superman the animated series. It had a different look to it. It had a different tone. It wasn't cartoonish because of the subject matter.
Yeah.
The subject matter wasn't so, okay, Robin to the Batcave. Da-da-da-da. Like it's not that it's not that
Well, like the
style
Super
of
Friends, yeah. I mean,
yeah,
there's
you
a
go,
couple
Super
of things,
Friends.
right? And this is a good point that you bring up with the whole Batman series, because when that came out, that was one of the first advances of animation, at least television animation. And it's like, okay, this is... And it wasn't just that the stories got more mature and everything else. It was also, like you said, the animation was just really good. Really good. And I think that this, now that we've gotten into 3D computer animation, it takes it even more.
Up a notch.
It just takes it. Yes, exactly. It just really cranks it up a notch. And I think that that's a really important thing, which honestly, that's one of the reasons why, as much as I would love to have another good Star Wars film, you give me some of these series and then you give me all these amazing animated shows, I'm good. Because this is where all the good stories are living right now. I mean, you could pick on the live action shows a little bit and say, all right, they're making a few mistakes here and there. But they don't do that with the animated shows. For some reason, the animated shows really knock it out of the park,
Yeah, I mean, like even this one in particular, where we're seeing some heavy political thriller type stuff. So when we talk about Star Wars moving into different genres and different directions, this kind of shows you what's possible, right?
Yeah.
And in a way, it's kind of a sketch, if you will, because it's animated. So, however, you can see how you could take a story arc such as this or a topic and make it its own thing, right? So, in this, we see the whole debate in the Senate House about what are to be done with the clones. Everybody, and it's really political because you have the banking clan who we've heard from previously in the Clone Wars. They're kind of on board with what Palpatine it wants to do as far as creating a new military base comprised, like I said before, comprised of the citizens of the respective planets. And it's like, okay, well, the idea is that, if you love the Empire, you will fight for the Empire. And that's going to make you even better. And we need to phase out these clones because they're no longer showing that they are as effective as they once were because um, they're not obeying as much, or you have these rebel clones who are become, insurgents now to the Galactic Empire. So now they're like, okay, we're starting to see that we need to phase these clones out before they start becoming a problem for us, and we need to bring in people who act or bring in a new military that actually cares about where the Empire is going,
Yeah,
and
but
that's
even
going to
more
be
than that,
based upon the Republic.
one of the other things that I thought that they brought up that was brilliant is the fact that, and this is actually their main point, was the fact that due to the accelerated aging, that a
Mm-hmm.
lot of these guys are just going to age out. It's like, look, we gotta
Right.
figure out what's going on, because otherwise we're going to have this aged out army. And you do bring up a great point, because in the Senate, and I thought that was some of the strongest writing of the episode, actually, and there was a lot to choose from. I mean, everything from Chuchi, is that her name?
Yep.
Everything from her, and how she was uncovering the plot with Rampart and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of the strongest writing I really think was in that Senate chamber, because there were so many elements that they had. One, they addressed, hey, Palpatine hasn't been around in a while. When's he gonna come back? What's his
when does he
stance
stand
on
on
this?
this?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then of course, you have and it wasn't Masamita, it was the other dude that's always with him, because there's always those two guys with him. Masamita's one of them, and then there's that guy. And what I thought was really cool was that he was basically giving the Emperor's, canned typical stance or whatever. So that was one thing that I thought was cool. That was that you were starting to see now through the Senate's eyes that, hey, the Empire is supposed to be kind of like the Republic, but yeah, things are changing. Now Palpatine doesn't come out anymore, and so there's that. The other thing that I thought was cool was that they were debating what to do. It was kind of like you said, they're taking on something that you don't really think about. Like, yeah, okay, we got all these clones.
Well, they also kind of address another he kind of slid this in it, which I love. Was Bail Organa brought up the fact was like, these emergency powers were supposed to be laid down
Yes,
when the war was
yes.
over, and we're not at
Right.
war right now, so you know.
What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and not only that, but in addition to that, and it was all wrapped up. It wasn't Bale. I think it was one of the other senators that was like, listen, the war's over. Why are we spending all this money on the military? There's all these
Mm-hmm.
other issues that we need to do. And to me, and you were alluding to this with your point the whole time, is that it's time that we have a true Star Wars political thriller. Andor
Well,
kind of covered it with the Mon Mothma stuff, but I don't know.
well, I mean, I think this is the part. This is how you get the war, right? So everybody kind of knows Star Wars, and we've been talking about on our other show on Mondays. We've been breaking down, what Star Wars is, and breaking down these different films and whatnot. And this is a huge, very integral part of the Star Wars story, saga, whatever you want to call it. Because without these political issues that we have to follow, there will be no Star Wars. There will be no war, because that's how all this stuff began in the first place. And
Well,
this is
either
kind of
that or it
where
would just be, like a mindless, typical sci fi thing.
yeah, but this gives it meat, because this
Right.
gives you context of, now we have something. This is why we're fighting. This is what the war, because wars are usually based upon um governments who don't like each other, or disagreements and things like that. So this is where the war comes in. It's basically, you have this one guy, Palpatine, manipulating this whole thing, so just so he can gain ultimate control over the galaxy. And he's kind of fashioned this war together, and he plays both sides of the coin, so things end up in his favor either way you flip it. And it's so brilliant, just that whole concept alone. um and we're seeing how things are being played out here, and this is just a microcosm of it. It's like, okay, well, how do I gain more control? The people. If I get more people to buy into this, you
Hmm.
know, they'll do the work for me. I don't have to work as hard, because you got people who are invested in the military, and they're like, hey, my son or my, uh, dad is a stormtrooper. I'm proud of him. Like, I'm proud that he's fighting for our freedoms and blah, 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 blah. So now you
Right.
have that buy in. And so that's
Exactly.
what makes
Instead of
all
an
this
army that's been, cloned or whatever, it's like
just
people.
created.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But another important point, I'm glad you brought this up.
Hmm.
Palpatine is, if nothing else, a king of false flags, because I don't know if people necessarily caught this in this episode, but we already know that he was playing both sides with the separatists, and he basically created that
Hmm.
war, which allowed him to create the army, which gave him the emergency, and it just kept going from there, right? But they did talk about the whole insurgency, and it was implied when the one dude, not the Masamita guy, but the other guy that's always with him, I wish I could
Hmm.
remember that guy's name, when he was talking to Rampart, after that meeting, like, hey man, you're gonna have to do a little bit more to get this bill passed, because if anybody's taking the fall for this, it's not gonna be me, kind of a thing. It
Hmm.
was implied during pretty much that whole scene. I don't remember exactly when it was pinpointed, but it was implied that actually they're behind the insurgency. They're making these, insurgent attacks in order
Hmm.
to justify having more military presence and everything else, and they're so I think a lot of people might have missed that Palpatine is still doing the same thing. He's just doing it on a little
Yep.
bit smaller scale now.
Right, right. And then there's the other side of things that you really don't stop and think about, are the clones.
Yeah.
And that's what Senator Chuchi's whole point was, is that, okay, these aren't just some droids you can just, these aren't machines you can just turn off. These are actual people. Like, these are human beings who have feelings, who eat, breathe, drink, who have feelings, you know what I mean? And it's like you're just casting them aside and basically decommissioning them, whatever that means for, well, we know what that means, but you know, how they're kind of just saying this blanketed, oh, decommission them. What do they do? Because, okay, let's just say you don't kill them. Let's say you don't kill the clone troopers. You just kind of just let them, all right, your services are no longer required. Here's your pink slip. But there's no benefit program for them. There's no housing for them. There's no job. Like what? Because that's all that they know. That's all they were bred for. And that's one of those moments that you saw at the bar where he was just like, when Chuchi was trying to, make her case to him, he was like, well, make me fight again. Can you do that? Because that's all I know how to do. That's all I've been bred to do.
Right.
So,
and what was cool was when she kind of fired back and was just like, well, what are you going to do when you get too old to fight? Nah, you didn't think about that, did you? And that was cool.
Exactly.
But not only that, see, and this is why I'm glad that they did this. I'm glad that they spent the... I was concerned, and I think it was toward the beginning of season 1, where they had that episode where they were starting to get some stormtroopers in there, and it was kind of that mix or whatever. They did that a little in season 1. I was afraid that was going to be the extent of it. I was really happy to see that they're spending some good time giving us the background and a lot of the stuff behind the changeover from the clone troopers to stormtroopers, because, I mean, if you think about it, that's a big deal. That's a huge thing. You leave episode 3, you've got a bunch of clone troopers. You come up even in Solo, right? Which takes place like, I don't know, 10 years or something later. Somewhere around when Obi-Wan does. And even with the Obi-Wan series, same thing, right? Now you got a bunch of stormtroopers. So now you're left wondering, what was there an Order 67? You know what I mean? Did the stormtroopers all activate Order 67 and now all the clone troopers? I mean, what did they do? And this is, now we're getting into it. They are finally addressing how it went from clone troopers to stormtroopers. Because, I mean, again, I think if casual fans hear this, they're just going, nerd alert and just pretty much going, really, guys? I mean, with things going on in the world, you're worried about how clone troopers went to stormtroopers. I mean, but again, if you're invested in the story and you're talking about the story, this is a pretty important part of it. And I think, I don't know, I think sometimes people miss that. And I was really glad to see that they are actually spending real time dealing with this. Now, it's interesting because we already have episodes 8 and 9 out. Look, I told everybody in the beginning, all right, schedules have been we've been sick off and on. I mean, this hasn't really been the best 2 or 3 weeks for us. And we barely been able to hold it together. So I recognize the fact that we're reviewing episode 7. I know that episode 8 and 9 are out already. I know that the outcome has been, of some of the stuff has, been determined. So I'm not, I get that. We're just, again, we're basing everything on what we know for this episode. So I want to, and this is something that you talked about, what was it? It was in our Attack of the Clones review. You had actually pointed out something about this topic, actually. I don't remember what it was now. I wanted to point it out, but... Oh, and keep in mind, Monday we will be doing the Revenge of the Sith review. So, you're definitely going to want to check that out. But I think it's really important that you deal with this because, like you said, this is a more adult, mature type of a subject to deal with in Star Wars. This isn't what a lot of people think Star Wars is. This is the kind of episode that shows people that Star Wars has a lot more substance and depth than people think it does.
Yeah, truly. One of the things that, about this particular episode is like you get a lot of like I said before, a lot of political thriller, Rampart commissioning another clone to basically take out another clone.
Wasn't
Like,
that
you
cool?
know, yeah, and it's
Do
like
we know who that is?
at
Was
first
that
I thought it
some?
was Crosshair at
That's what
first.
I thought too, because the voice was really similar. I'm like, dang, is that Kron? Did he like grow his hair back or something?
Yeah. I thought it was Crosshair, but it ended
Yep.
up being somebody else. He had the whole like basically their version of a cyanide capsule.
Yeah, I don't.
It's like
That looked pretty brutal, actually. I
yeah,
mean,
it's like instead of some poison,
oh,
it's like
well, let's
yeah,
talk about that. There's Rex. Rex came back
yeah,
for that
yeah,
scene. I mean, because when Chuchi was pretty much trying to meet with Slip, who
yep,
we didn't know, but he was trying to meet with Rex. And that's another thing, just the way they handled the whole, you know,
hmm
um, just sort of, I don't know, like spy thriller kind of thing going, right?
yeah. It kind of had like a Jason Bourne type
Yeah,
thing
very
going on
cloak and
almost.
daggerish, There was a lot of, and again, it was real suspense, and that's something that I appreciated about this particular episode. This might, I'm going to say it now, this might be my favorite episode of this season that I've seen so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was a really um meaty episode. I think this you get a lot of information, a lot of speculation that you can make from this, and it leaves you wanting to see how this plays. I mean, we all know how it ends, of course. The stormtroopers eventually
Sure.
take over.
Yeah.
So we know that, but just how do we get there? Like, are we going to ever hear just like Bill Organa said, okay, well, where does Palpatine stand on this? Are we going to hear from him? Is he going to say anything about any of this? Does he ever make an appearance? So these are the questions that you're kind of almost left with. At the end of this, it's like, okay, how's the Bad Batch going to factor into this? Because they're already on the outskirts, and I'm sure that's Rex is calling them in. So it's just like, all right, well, they're already being hunted. They were already being hunted by the Empire. The Empire thinks they're dead. So now they're going to be going real close to the fire here, dealing with all this stuff. So it's really shaping up to be a nice couple episodes.
Well, in addition to that, you bring up something else that I wanted to bring up a little earlier. And that is, while I was watching this episode, it was so good I forgot the Bad Batch wasn't in it. The show's called The
Right.
Bad Batch. They weren't even in it, not even one character.
hmm
That's how strong this was. And this shows that you can. This is one of the few shows, I think, that can afford to do these little side story things or whatever, right? Where you don't feature the Bad Batch. They're the only ones because, sure, you had the Mandalorian in the Book of Boba Fett for like an episode and a
hmm
half, and you didn't even see Boba Fett in his own show. But the problem with that is that show was so centered on Boba Fett's story that I mean, let's face it, those two Mandalorian-ish episodes were probably some of the best episodes of that series. But you
hmm
did kind of miss, and you question, where is Boba Fett in his own show? With this one, even though the Bad Batch are the central characters, the story arc really focuses on those characters in a bigger storyline, right? It's really more like we're looking through their eyes at the story. And now we're looking through a different set of characters' eyes. And that's why I think that you're still focused on the story at large. The fact that the Bad Batch wasn't in it this time, it didn't really suffer.
Sure. I mean, in the pacing of everything, the action, the drama, and the suspense, it moved at such a rate that wasn't too fast, it wasn't too slow, but
Yes.
it kept you on that steady pace where it didn't give you time to miss anybody or wonder where people are, because the story kept feeding you. It kept feeding you. It kept feeding you. And so
Mm-hmm.
you're constantly chewing, and you're just until you get to the end, you're like, man, where was the Bad Batch? But you don't even care because now you're full,
Exactly. But
and that
that's
and
my
that was
point, though, right?
great writing.
Because if the writing hadn't been that good, Or if
Right.
it wasn't focused on a greater storyline that people care about, you would have been, where's the Bad Batch in this? Show's called The Bad Batch. I tuned in for them. But you don't. You tune in to look at this other world through their eyes. And that's because this is the only show that's really giving us the meat of what happened immediately after Revenge of the Sith, which I think is awesome. I can't say enough good things about this episode. Let's do this before we give our usual wrap up or whatever. What was your favorite scene? I know I'm putting you on the spot. I shouldn't do that, but now I got to think of mine.
I don't know. It's kind of a toss up. I want to say it's that the initial scene in the Senate room, because that
Yeah.
just had a lot of. But I think I'm going to say that the last final, moment where Chuchi's running, and Rex eventually comes to save the day. I thought that was cool that they brought Rex. That was just like a great reveal. So that's going to be my favorite.
Well, I'm not trying to cheese out because I kind of, they're tied really. That's one. The Senate one's the other. But honestly, I think I have to give an edge to the beginning. Not just the scene with Coruscant. I mean, I'm not cheesing out that much. I mean that whole thing between Slip and his friend. I think his name was Chase or something like that.
Oh, when they were in the bar.
Well, so from the time they're in the bar to when they're then walking to their speeder, and they keep talking, and then of course he ends up getting shot and then slips on the run. But just the way that whole scene felt and the way that was handled. Now I even forgot I was watching Star Wars. I was just watching this really good, show that I was just instantly hooked more than anything. So I probably have to get a slight edge maybe to that whole intro scene because that really hooked me into this episode.
Okay.
Majorly. Majorly.
That's fair. What would you rate this episode?
Oh, I knew that was coming.
Yeah, man.
What are we rating the episode? You know what? I'm going to give it a 9. I'm going to give it a 9.
Okay.
It was awesome, right? I almost would give this thing a 10, but I have a really hard time giving anything a 10. But I got to say, this one's a contender. No pun intended. This is a contender. I mean, this...
I'm going to give it an 8.5. Only because I feel like this is only the beginning. And this is a huge thing. So I'm wondering, okay, I want to reserve the 9 and 10 if there's something coming on the back end. And I'm like, ooh, this was really, saying top notch. So I'm going to give this an 8.5.
Yeah, I'm still floating between maybe a 9 and 10. I might even go as high as 9.5. I do agree that we have to see, like, you could almost retroactively rate this episode, right? You could almost watch this mid-season finale or whatever, and then go back and go, okay, in light of episodes 8 and 9, where do we see 7 now? But all I'm doing is, and I'm not even taking this as part of the series, I'm just taking this as a standalone episode. It was really well written. It was well executed. I mean, the only other episode that I think even begins to stand up to this one is that Crosshair-centric one.
Oh, yeah.
That was a little earlier on. That I thought was just outstanding as well. But this one, I mean, it was just elevated in every way. The way that it felt, the suspense. Like I said, I mean, I almost even forgot I was watching Star Wars. I kind of want to go back inside that episode. I mean, it was really, really good to me. But again, as we always say, it's not about us, it's about you guys. What did you guys think of this episode? Did you like it? Did you hate it? What was your favorite part? What was your rating? Let us know in the comments section. And, we answer all of our comments, so you're definitely going to want to do that. Again, next Friday, Lord willing, because I know how shaky our schedule has been. We should be rating episodes 8 and 9. So February 20... 2nd. Is that the Wednesday? I think it is. Yeah, it is.
I believe so.
Yeah, it is. Wednesday, February 22nd, which is actually this coming Wednesday. Bad Batch comes back with episode 10. So we're going to definitely rate episodes 8 and 9 next Friday. Maybe we'll squeeze 10 in there. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Just join us and you'll see. But this Monday, you're definitely going to want to check us out because we will be doing the in-depth analysis of Revenge of the Sith. If you guys haven't been watching our Monday shows, pretty much we've been asking the question, what is Star Wars? And we've been delving into it. And we started out with going into the legacy and what makes Star Wars what it is. And then we began pretty much right away, right? We just jumped right into the films. And we did the original trilogy, and we're about to wrap up the prequel trilogy. And then what we decided to do is actually go in order after that. We'll do like Solo, Rogue One, and then we'll go into the sequels. Because if we went in chronological order, we'd have to do Force Awakens, then go back to Rogue One, then Last Jedi, then Solo. I don't want to do that. I think that's actually part of the problem with the whole thing, right? So we don't want to be guilty of that. So this coming Monday, 8 o'clock, join us. We will be doing an in-depth analysis and discussion and chatting live with you guys. Revenge of the Sith. So until then, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.